He rolled into the building quietly. No entourage, no flag on his back, just a battered wheelchair and a folded envelope clutched like it held the last truth anyone still cared about. The receptionist barely looked up. The junior attorney cracked a joke, and by the time they were done mocking him, they had no idea they had just insulted the very man whose name was engraved into the foundation beneath their feet. What happened next changed every single life in that building, forever. It was just past 9 a.m. on a chilly Monday morning when the man in the wheelchair rolled to the polished glass doors of Whitaker and Lane LLP, one of the most prestigious law firms in the city, a towering place filled with smooth marble, well-dressed egos, and conversations that smelled like old money and future lawsuits. The receptionist glanced up from her oversized monitor, barely hiding her annoyance as the man's wheels squeaked faintly against the tile. He wasn't dressed like the other visitors. No suit, no tie, no fancy watch. Just a faded army-issue jacket with patches too old for her to recognize and pants that had been mended more than once. His boots, cracked and dusty, peeked out beneath a blanket that covered his knees. He moved slowly, deliberately, the kind of slow that comes not from laziness but from battles, medical or military, you don't talk about anymore. In his weathered hands was a single envelope, creased but clean, addressed in firm block letters to one of the firm's senior partners. Margaret Lane. ESQ. The receptionist sat back, arms crossed, that polite but sharp smile plastered across her face like so many in customer-facing jobs. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" she asked, sweetly fake. The man nodded slightly. "No, ma'am. Just need to deliver this directly." She didn't look at the envelope, didn't check the name. She just motioned toward a side table with a plastic tray, labeled drop-off only. "You can leave it there," she said. "She won't be available today. In meetings, all day." Her words were crisp, final. But he didn't move. "I prefer to hand it off to someone on her staff. It's time-sensitive." There was a weight to his voice. Not volume, not anger, but that unmistakable edge you only hear from people who've waded through worse. She leaned forward, unimpressed. "Sir, I really need you to move along. We have clients arriving soon." "Thank you." Then, with a swift flick of the wrist, she dropped his envelope in the tray next to takeout menus and property deeds, like it was just another piece of junk mail. Just then, a younger man in a shiny blue suit swaggered into the lobby, checking his teeth in his phone camera and adjusting his lapel like he was prepping for a GQ shoot. He was clearly one of the firm's junior attorneys. Not old enough to remember dial-up, but arrogant enough to think he invented oxygen. As he passed the old man in the wheelchair, he smirked. "Hey there, Captain America's granddad," he said, loud enough for the receptionist to giggle. "You lose your Avengers meeting?" The joke landed with a nasty thud. The vet didn't flinch. Didn't look up, didn't respond, just stared at the polished floor, like it was a battlefield he'd seen before. The lawyer turned to his date waiting by the coffee bar and whispered loud enough for half the lobby to hear. "These guys show up all the time, pretending they're war heroes. Probably Google how to look military and slapped on a jacket. What a scam." The receptionist laughed. The date looked uncomfortable. And the old man? He stayed silent, his knuckles whitening slightly as he adjusted the frayed blanket over his legs. No anger, no defense, just stillness. But that stillness carried weight. It was a kind of stillness that made you feel ashamed before you even knew why. Near the edge of the lobby, pushing him up quietly under the plants, was a janitor named Lewis, mid-50s, quiet, barrel-chested, and always wearing the same ball cap from his old unit. Nobody really looked at Lewis. He was invisible, as janitors often are, but he noticed everything. He saw the look in the old man's eyes when the joke landed, saw the way his hands tightened, not in rage, but in memory. Lewis had seen that same look before, in the mirror after the golf, as he swept around the wheelchair. Something fell from the man's lap, a silver coin, about the size of a $50, etched with a strange crest and worn Latin script. Lewis picked it up automatically and then froze. His breath caught. The coin wasn't some trinket. It was real, the real kind. The kind they only gave commanders who'd led classified recon in regions so black they didn't show up on satellite maps. You didn't buy that coin online. You didn't even talk about it unless you were ready to disappear. Lewis stared at the coin, then at the man who simply said, "Would appreciate that back." Lewis handed it over, hand trembling. "Yes, sir," he said softly, like a muscle memory he couldn't stop. The old man nodded once, and that was all. But Lewis had already made a decision. This wasn't some random vet begging for respect. This was someone important. Upstairs, unaware of the unfolding disrespect below, the firm's senior partners were hosting a quiet closed-door board meeting for the Senatorial Defense Fund, a military nonprofit focused on veteran reintegration and trauma recovery. Chairing the session was U.S. Senator Helen McCarthy, a no-nonsense former Marine Corps colonel with a zero-tolerance policy for political pandering or performative patriotism. Her chest bore the ribbons of 2 deployments and a star for valor. She left the battlefield behind, but not her fire. Her voice still carried the cadence of command, and when she spoke, people listened, even CEOs and judges. Lewis rode the staff elevator to the top floor, clutching the memory of that coin like it was burning in his palm. He didn't knock when he reached the conference room, just walked in, nodded at the nearest aide, and whispered, "There's someone downstairs you need to meet." The aide frowned. This is a closed meeting. But McCarthy had already heard him. She looked up from her binder. "What's going on, Lewis?" He held out the coin like it was a live grenade. "He's here. I don't know his name, but he dropped this." McCarthy's entire face changed. She stood up slowly, walked over, and took the coin. Her thumb brushed the edge. The crest, the Latin, the weight. She didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate. She looked at her chief of staff and said, "Clear the next hour. This meeting's adjourned." Someone objected. She ignored them. When a man like that shows up unannounced, you don't ask why. You ask how fast it can get to him. She took the elevator down alone, riding in silence, fists clenched at her side. The receptionist didn't even recognize her until it was too late. The doors opened with a soft chime, and the air in the lobby shifted like a storm front blowing in. McCarthy walked out like she owned the place. Not because she wanted to, but because she'd already earned it. Her military coat was crisp, her hair tight in regulation bun, and the fury in her eyes made every head turn. She spotted the old man already heading for the door, his envelope still forgotten in that stupid plastic tray. "Colonel Abramson," she called out, her voice echoing across the marble. The man stopped but didn't turn. She crossed the lobby in 6 swift steps, wheeled him around gently, and said, loud enough for every ear to hear, "Is that how we treat Joseph Abramson now?" And just like that, silence fell. Not awkwardness, not confusion, just silence, thick and sharp, like guilt waking up inside your chest. The receptionist went pale. The junior attorney stared like he'd seen a ghost. And Lewis, the janitor, stood straighter than he had in years. By then, the building security had already been called again. This time they hesitated. No one moved. The senator turned to the room and said, "You know who this man is?" She wasn't asking. She was about to tell them. Colonel Joseph Abramson led the 3rd Mountain Recon Unit through Hellman during the worst year of the war. His unit operated without air support, outnumbered 6-1, and still managed to extract a trapped medical team with 0 civilian casualties. He carried his radio man 3 miles on a shattered hip. He one-stitched a classified operations map into his jacket lining to keep it from being compromised. The Pentagon gave him a medal. He gave it back, said the team deserved it more. Her voice was breaking, not from tears, but from reverence. He was in town today not to be remembered, not to beg. He came to drop off a sealed proposal to fund scholarships for children of medics who died on the field, because, as he put it, no one remembers the medics. She paused, then looked around, her voice quieter but sharper. "But I promise you, after today, everyone in this building will." The coin still sat on the counter where the senator had placed it. Silver, scuffed and silent, like a witness to everything that had just been said. But even more deafening than the coin's silence was the sudden stillness of the people around it. The junior attorney's face had drained of color. The receptionist stood stiff as a lamppost, blinking like she couldn't process what was happening. But Colonel Abramson didn't gloat, didn't look for payback. He just waited calm and stone-faced, like a man who had waded through far worse storms than this one. A moment later, the law firm's head of security reappeared at the entrance of the lobby, having heard whispers through the earpieces of his team. But as he stepped through the glass doors, he paused, because now he saw who had taken control of the room. And for men like him, who'd served just enough to know what rank really looks like, there was no mistaking the air around Senator McCarthy. He gave a small nod to Colonel Abramson and stood at ease near the side wall. No more threats. No more shoving the old man out the door. This wasn't just some vet with a coin. This was a moment that demanded reverence. Then, from the second-floor balcony that overlooked the lobby, a door creaked open. High heels clicked against marble as Margaret Lane herself, one of the firm's named partners and a formidable legal mind with more medals of civic service than most judges, stepped out, looking down in disbelief at the gathering below. She hadn't been told Colonel Joseph Abramson was downstairs. If she had, the entire building would have come to a halt an hour earlier. Her eyes caught the coin, the wheelchair, the senator standing guard beside it, and she understood instantly. She turned to the stunned receptionist and said coldly, "You threw away that envelope?" The girl stammered, He didn't have an appointment.